Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Welcome to DCC Shop. In this episode, I'm going to continue to work on the two Southern Pacific GP40P-2s. I was thinking I might wrap it up with this episode, but it looks like there's going to be at least one more. So let's get started. So before we get started, I'll do a quick recap. In the first episode, I installed the Loksound decoder and speaker into the chassis on this model. And then in the second episode, I did the number boards and made them lightable. So in this episode, I want to tackle the rest of the lights. I'm going to be using fiber optics for the lenses, and one of the things that's important with fiber optics is to make sure that the ends are supported. This is a little piece of 040 styrene that I cut just as an example, and as you can see, the fiber optic strand can wiggle around a lot. So if I didn't put any more support in here, it would be hard to keep the headlight aimed in the right place. You know, it could be up or down, or, you know, I want them pointing down the track like they're supposed to. So one of the things that I need to do with this build is to make some supports for the lenses so that the ends stay stationary. In most of my builds, I use one of two kinds of supports. This is some aluminum tubing. This is 1/16 outside diameter, and then the inside diameter is about 30 thousandths, a little over actually. So it will accommodate a 30 thousandths fiber optic strand pretty nicely. The other thing I do is to laminate pieces of styrene together and then drill a hole in it. And I'll be using both of those techniques in this build. So you could really do these lights in any order, but I decided I'm going to start with the class lights. And just as a precaution, I'm going to make a shield for the cutting and drilling portion with this piece of masking tape, and I used a hole punch to put a hole in it in the center. These class lights are bulged outward, and as I'm sure a lot of you know, it's very hard to start a drill on a surface that's curved outward. So what I'm doing is I'm using a chisel blade and my hobby knife to try to make a little bit of a flat spot right on the top of the bulge and get it as centered as I can. When I do this, I try not to rely on the white painted dot that they used for the class light lens because these aren't always perfectly aligned. The little ring that's around the class light is actually a better guide, so I'm trying to center on that. Now that I got it started, I'm using a pin vise so I can drill a hole through the class light. I'm using 20 thousandths fiber optics for the class lights, and I used a number 75 drill bit, which is just slightly larger than 20 thousandths, so it's a good fit. These are pretty nicely held in there, but they're not loose. You know, you don't want it to be like jiggling around too much. So that's a pretty good size. Now that I've drilled through the class light, I'm going to take another drill, and I'm sorry I don't remember how big this is. It's a little smaller than 1/16, but it's about the same size as the fiber optic lens on the end of the strands that I created. And I'm using it just to drill into the class light to countersink it a little bit. I don't want to drill all the way through. So now I can test fit the fiber optic, push it in, and I've got a nice lens in there now. This is some Vallejo red, and I'm going to use this with a small brush to touch up the paint inside the class lights. It's a fairly close match for the SP red, not perfect, but for such a small dot of paint, I think it'll be fine. This is a 10-0 brush, and if there's a trick to this, it's to take the brush and put it in the hole that I drilled and then kind of swirl it around a little rather than trying to paint directly, because it's really easy to go outside the line, so to speak, and I don't want to do that. That looks like a pretty good match to me. So I talked about making supports for the lenses. For the class lights, I'm going to use these little bits of 40 thousandths black styrene. I've cut these into little pieces that are about 1/4 of an inch tall and about I don't know, maybe a little more than 1/8 of an inch wide, but the exact size doesn't really matter. They won't be seen inside the model. I'll laminate these together with some Same Stuff by Micromark, which is a plastic weld type of cement, good for styrene plastic. I glued some of those supports with the same plastic weld glue, liquid styrene cement, behind the class lights in the front of the engine. The one on the brake ratchet side is a little narrower because the brake ratchet is recessed into the nose and it kind of sticks out a little bit. Did the same thing in the back. This is a little kind of in shadow, unfortunately, but the supports are just glued to the inside of the shell. I like black plastic for this kind of stuff just because it's a little extra protection against light leaks, but you could also use white styrene. It doesn't really, functionally it doesn't really matter, except for the black blocks light better. Now that the supports are in there, I need to drill holes in them. And it occurred to me that I could have probably done all this in one step if I'd put the supports in before drilling the first time. But it's fine, this doesn't actually take that long because it's just plastic. Before I go too much further, I want to plug this hole because this is just a hole down into the body. I think this is part of the steam generator exhaust or something. But the LEDs that are going to be in here for the class lights and the rear headlight could potentially show through here too. So I don't want that to happen because that's not very realistic. I glued a little piece of 40 thousandths black styrene in there to plug the hole. There's enough clearance in here that I don't think it'll interfere with anything. I cut another piece of 40 thousandths styrene about the same size as the ones that I used to make the support blocks. I'm holding that piece behind the other blocks that are glued in with my finger and I'm drilling into it. I don't need to drill through it, I just need to make a little mark on it. So if you can see, try to get it to catch the light, there it goes. There's a little bit of a hole started in this piece now. For the class lights, I'll be using these 603 surface mount LEDs with pre-soldered leads from Eve model. These are the same ones that I used for the number boards. I'm using a larger drill bit to finish that little hole that I started on this piece earlier. I don't remember the exact size drill bit that I just used, but I think it's maybe like something like a number 50. It's smaller than 1/16, but it's about the same size as the front of the LED. And the idea is to make an LED holder and the LED will fit inside the hole. I find when doing this kind of work, it helps to have the LEDs on so that I can make sure that the LED is shining in the direction for maximum brightness, because generally they shine better to the front than they do to the sides, and obviously not to the back. So I just used this tester. This is just a 9-volt battery and a battery holder, and I soldered some alligator clip leads to it, and one of these has a resistor buried in here. I'm not sure which lead now, but one of them has a resistor, so I can hook this up directly to the LED without any fear of blowing it out. I've temporarily glued the LED into the hole with some CA just to hold it. This is looking pretty good. I used a different, bigger drill bit to countersink a little divot into another piece of plastic, and I'm going to use this as a backing for the LED. Now I can laminate these two pieces together and that will lock the LED into place. In a previous episode, I showed how I used heat to flare lenses onto the ends of the fiber optic strands. Now I'm using a paint pen, silver, to paint the back of the lenses so it looks a little bit like a reflector. Now I can install the fiber optic permanently. Use a little bit of canopy glue right behind where I painted it silver and just push it in. The canopy glue will dry clear, and the nice thing is if there's any excess, you can wipe it off with a damp cloth or paper towel or something like that. I'll use some sprue cutters, which are flush cutters for plastic, basically, and cut off the excess fiber optic. This is a little fussy to do on camera, but the next step is to glue the LED holder that I made to the back of the support block that's in the engine. I'm going to use some canopy glue for that in case I ever need to remove it. It's also good to do this with the LED lit so I can make sure to line up the LED with the class light and make sure that it shines properly. So just as I was about to glue that in, I realized that there's a small potential for a light leak. So I went ahead and took some black paint and painted around where the class lights are going to go, just to, add a little bit of insurance so that the light doesn't show through the shell. Also, a slight refinement to the design that I made after destroying one of these. I'm taking a file with a sharp edge and making just a little bit of a groove in this where the wires can go, so that it just allows a little bit of space. Makes a little wire run going up to the hole in the holder. So full disclosure, this took actually quite a bit of time to get these in and lined up so that they're both shining brightly and evenly and that both sides match. But I think it looks pretty good now. And these are the rear lights. I think these maybe were a little bit easier to put in because there's a little more room to work back there. Do you ever have one of those builds where everything goes wrong? This battery tester that I showed earlier that I've had for years chose this moment to die. The wires coming right out here broke. The black one is completely broken and the red one is almost broken. So I had to figure something else out for this. So as soon as I do that, I'll get back to what I was doing. So I fixed this for the moment just by soldering the wires to these posts or that, stick into the battery. So I don't know if this is going to last very long, but hopefully it'll get me through this build. In the process of installing the LEDs for the class lights into 2 engines, I ended up wrecking or having 3 of them fail. And I managed to get all the ones into 3197, but that left me with a shortage of lights for 3199, so I had to make some new ones. And when I did, I changed the design slightly. If you can see on these, instead of 2 equal size pieces of plastic, I made one slightly taller. And that allows me to get a grip on one of these with some tweezers or needle nose pliers and make it a little bit easier to hang on to them while I'm trying to coax them into position, because I found that it was pretty difficult to get them into position just by poking them with a screwdriver or some other tool, So this works out a little better. 3199 fought me a little more than 3197 did, but I did get the class lights installed and working. For the oscillating light above the cab, I'm going to use some 1/16 outside diameter aluminum tubing. This tubing is just the right size to fit into the openings that are already in the model. And once it's inserted, it's rigid enough that it should provide a good support for the fiber optics. I'll use my razor saw to cut a couple shorter pieces. Now I've got 2 pieces that are maybe a 1/4 inch or a little longer. The exact length really isn't critical. I'm using a 1/16 drill bit to countersink the end of the tubing to accommodate the lens a little better. I'll put a dab of canopy glue inside the openings, although the tubing is pretty snug and I'm not sure this is really necessary, but it's just a little added insurance. I use that same drill bit to coax them into final position. I want them to be recessed just a little bit, not too much. The tubing is recessed just a little bit into the headlight casting to allow room for the lens. Before I install these, I'm going to put a little black paint along the fiber optic strands to hopefully prevent any glow from coming into the cab. Now that the fiber optics are painted, I can just push them through. Had to be a little careful to route them through the cab and get them coming out the back in the right spot. But once they're started, you just kind of shove them in. It's a little hard to see, but they're coming through the opening and the back of the cab wall up at the top and just into the body of the locomotive. Sorry if this is a little hard to see. I cut both of these strands to the same length, and then I wrapped them both in a piece of heat shrink tubing that's just big enough to hold them. That'll help keep them together and aligned so that when I put the LED on it, they'll shine with the same brightness. This is a 3mm LED that I put together in one of the previous episodes. And this is some heat shrink tubing. I'm just going to slip it over the end. Sorry, there's really no way to do this without my hand being in the way. You want to end up with something that looks like this, so that the LED is shrouded by the heat shrink tubing, and that will keep all the light going forward rather than shining inside the body of the locomotive. Because the tubing I used around the LED is just a little bigger than the tubing I used over the fiber optic strands, they telescope together, and that helps to hold the LED in place. And there it is lit. Of course, when it's connected to the decoder, I'll program in an oscillating effect and all of that, but it does work. I'm going to leave things here for now because I don't want to do the rest of that until it comes time to actually do the final assembly on the model. That'll do it for this time. Next time I'm planning to tackle the headlights and emergency lights. If you like this video, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.